Hi, welcome to our friends on Instagram and of course Facebook Live and Zoom as well. Welcome, dear friends. Tonight we are moving into a very special day in the Jewish calendar, which of course is referred to as Lag BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer period. And we're going to discuss, first of all, a little bit about the Omer itself, what it was, and we're going to talk about a very important character in this period of time by the name of Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva was one of the great leaders of the Jewish people. And Rabbi Akiva was someone who was very greatly affected by what happened to the Jewish people at this period, and then really for many years afterwards. First of all, a little about the Omer and what's happening. So we are right now in the period between Pesach and Shavuot, and that is a 49-day period that we count from the second day of Pesach all the way till Shavuot, also known as Atzeret. And that holiday, of course, celebrates the giving of the Torah by God to the Jewish people on Mount Sinai. So this is a very happy period. We're building up, as we've spoken about before, every day, a new number, building our connection between Pesach and Shavuot. And everything about this time was for a long time an extremely happy, exciting, spiritual occasion of building day after day. Day 1, day 2, day 5, 10, 15, 20, of course, is Shavuot itself. And Shavuot is the culmination that occurs on the 50th day, and we count up to, but not including the 50th. And this was always the Jewish calendar that went on for at least 1,000 years until something happened. You see, there was a great rabbi who lived a couple of thousand years ago, and his name was Rabbi Akiva. And Rabbi Akiva was an extraordinary character and individual. Really, much of the Torah we have today came from him and his students. And what's amazing about Rabbi Akiva, my friends, is that he grew up without knowing a single thing about Judaism. He was so estranged from Judaism, from mitzvah, from Torah, actually from his own admission. He hated religion and especially rabbis. I know it's hard to believe that a Jew can hate a rabbi, but let's just take it as a possibility because Rabbi Akiva was one of those individuals. And actually, many years later, he had many students. We'll talk about them soon. And one of them approached him and said, "Tell me, how much did you hate the rabbis?" And I'll tell you how much I hated rabbis. If I would have seen a rabbi, I would have bitten him like a donkey. And his students, in typical rabbinic fashion, said, "Rabbi Akiva, why would you say you'd bite a rabbi like a donkey? Why not like a dog? Usually the metaphor for biting something is a dog biting. Why exactly a donkey?" And Rabbi Akiva said, "Because I hated the rabbis so much that when I bit them, I wanted to bite them like a donkey. Because a dog only gives a flesh wound, but a donkey has the ability to break the bone as well. That's how much I hated the rabbis." Wow. This was someone, obviously, who was desperate to fight against the rabbinic leadership in his day. However, he had what we call in English an epiphany. Something happened to him and he had a change of heart. Even someone who hated the rabbinate that much. And the rabbis tell us, or Akiva's own admission tells us, he was walking one day and he saw a rock and a waterfall was dripping onto this little rock, this pebble, and was forming a dip over many months or probably years in this little rock. And he had a feeling, an awakening at that moment, which I'm sure he'd thought about this many times, but this was his moment. This was his one special moment. This small little spectacle in front of him had a lasting impression. He said, wow, if water that is so soft can affect something as hard as a rock, then how much can Torah and a life of Jewish faith and belief in God affect even me, whose head is as hard as a rock? And he made a decision. At that moment, he was going to become a great Torah scholar. And that's what he did. At the age of 40 years old, he went to sit down with a bunch of children and started to learn the Aleph Bet. And they were young kids, and they were learning B, G. And Rabbi Akiva repeated after them, B, G. And D, Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet. And he learned the alphabet. And then he learned some verses from the Holy Torah. And he learned more verses and then some commentaries. And eventually became, after 40 years of studying, 24 years of which he left home in order to grow into who he became. He became one of the leading rabbis, and actually most people don't realize the leading Kabbalists of his day for sure, but maybe even world history. I'll give you a little story about that in just a moment. He had a very, very holy wife. Her name was Rachel, and she came from a very wealthy family. Her father was named Kalba Savua. That wasn't actually his name. It means satisfied like a dog, because people used to come to his home all the time, and they would leave their home, his home, satisfied like a full dog. However, when he found out that his beautiful, amazing daughter was going to marry this ignoramus, Akiva, he got so upset, he disowned her and disowned him. And they lived in abject poverty just to allow Rabbi Akiva to grow and become the great leader that he was. And so he was ignorant for 40 years, and then he studied for 40 years, and then he taught for 40 years. And he died at 120 years old through terrible torture at the hands of the Romans at the end of the Second Temple period. That's a brief synopsis of who this individual was. Let me just share one more story about him, just so you understand the greatness of this individual. The Talmud tells us a quite amazing story about 4 individuals who entered into an orchard, a paradise. Now, when you're a child, as I was, you read this Gemara and you think that 4 rabbis are going for a walk in an apple orchard. This orchard actually is a metaphor for paradise. They went into some mystical trance, some kind of deep revelation came to them, a place of deep Kabbalah, mystical understanding. That's how the rabbis understand what this was, right? The word paradise is 4 letters, Pei, Resh, Dalet, Samach. Pei is Pshat, which is the basic understanding of the Torah. Resh is for Remez, the hinted understandings. Dalet is Drosh, the deeper understandings. And Samach is Sod, the secrets of the Torah. And they went to the deepest secrets of Kabbalah, of mystical Judaism, say the rabbis. So profound was this experience that each one of them was affected differently from this experience. One of them, these 4 rabbis were Ben Azai, Ben Zoma, Elisha ben Abuya, and Rabbi Akiva. And one of them died from this experience. One of them became an apostate, a non-believer. One of them went totally crazy by studying this practical Kabbalah. And Rabbi Akiva went into the orchard and left the orchard safely because God granted him that ability, only because of God's great favor towards him. And so we see from this story, first of all, the danger of entering this deep, mystical, practical, Kabbalistic realm, whatever that means. But we know that Rabbi Akiva was the only one who was able to enter the orchard and leave the orchard unharmed. That was Rabbi Akiva. And that's who he was. Rabbi Akiva is someone who also bequeathed us an amazing principle, which has become one of the most famous statements in the entire Gemara and really in Jewish history. To understand that statement and then to understand what happened in this period, let's go back just a little bit and meet 2 great Tanaim, Hillel and Shammai. You may have heard of them. Hillel and Shammai, 2 great Jewish leaders who had their own respective schools. And both of them used to have very good, sometimes heated debates between them and between their schools that are considered L'Shem Shemaim for the sake of heaven. So although they disagreed, the halacha pretty much always follows Hillel, except on 6 occasions we go like Shammai. And the story is told that a convert approached Shammai and said, I want to convert to Judaism, a potential convert, but you must teach me the entire Torah standing on 1 foot, which is a nice way of saying, teach me everything, but just sum it up in 1 sentence. Shammai got very upset with this individual, took a stick, actually a building ruler, and chased this guy out and said, get out of here, that's not the way we do things. I can't summarize the entire Torah, everything that we believe in one sentence. You're mocking me. And he drove him out. He then went to Hillel and said, Hillel, I want to convert, but teach me the entire Torah standing on one foot. And Hillel thought about it and said, okay, you know what? Whatever you don't like being done to you, don't do to others. I.e., v'yahavta l'recha kamocha. Love other people like you love yourself. The rest, said Hillel, is commentary, go learn. And this man did. He took that one piece of advice and he left and he learned from that one principle, and he eventually became a great and holy convert among the Jewish people, according to our commentators. Rabbi Akiva heard this story and made the following very, very famous statement. V'yahavta l'recha kamocha, loving other people like you love yourself, ze klal gadol b'Torah. This is a very important general principle in the Torah. You must love other people like you love yourself. What does that mean? What does it mean, you? V'yahavta l'recha kamocha. Love other people like yourself. And then Rabbi Akiva is adding, and ze klal gadol. What do you mean a klal gadol? A very great general principle. It's another principle. There's a lot of principles in the Torah. What exactly is Rabbi Akiva adding with his, ze klal gadol? This is a very important general principle. And the rabbis tell us something very, very profound. They say that this idea of loving other people like you love yourself and not harming people like you don't want to be harmed has within it many, many mitzvot. Many mitzvot from the Torah, but also rabbinic mitzvot as well. Actually, nearly every mitzvah somehow can be linked to this one principle. I mean, the obvious stuff is don't take revenge, and don't bear a grudge, and don't speak lashon hara, and give charity. That stuff makes sense. But there's a whole bunch of other stuff Rabbi Akiva is saying also applies to v'yahavta l'recha kamocha, loving other people like you love yourself. Eating matzah, who would have thought? Going to keep Shabbat, who knew? Keeping the Yovel, the Jubilee year, and not working. The land of Israel, the Shemitah. All the 613 mitzvot and the many rabbinic mitzvot can be found inside this one principle. If you figure this one thing out, if you're able to love other people like you love yourself, everything else is going to fit in. So Rabbi Akiva's statement has become, for us the Jewish people, world famous. Because he taught us that this idea of loving other people like you love yourself isn't just like a nice idea that God threw into the Torah. By the way, when you love other people, love them all and like you love yourself. This is a fundamental concept within the Torah. With that in mind, we now know how great Rabbi Akiva was. We know that he's probably the most famous Baal Teshuvah, newly acquired Jew in terms of observance in the entire Torah. Maybe one of the greatest ones in Jewish history. There were others, but he's probably one of the most famous. We know that actually he was the descendant of converts himself. We know that he reached the deepest levels of Torah understandings that are capable for mankind. So much so, just one more midrash, that Moshe Rabbeinu somehow, whatever this means, was able to time travel, sit in Rabbi Akiva's class, although Rabbi Akiva lived many years after Moshe Rabbeinu died, and when he sat in his class, he wasn't even on the front row. Moses was in row 6 or 7, which means he wasn't even the greatest student of Rabbi Akiva. And actually this dismayed Moshe Rabbeinu a lot until he heard Rabbi Akiva say, everything I'm telling you is from Moshe Rabbeinu at Sinai. And so Moshe Rabbeinu's time travel to Rabbi Akiva's class, he ended up being much calmer and happier with the results. Okay, what happened? So at one point in Rabbi Akiva's life, we're told, he had thousands and thousands of students. 12,000 pairs of students, 24,000 individual students. And these students weren't just regular people. These were extremely knowledgeable, great rabbis who were going to take the teachings of Rabbi Akiva and spread them throughout the world. The entire Jewish world of Torah was going to be revealed to the world through these 24,000 individuals. And they lived all over the land of Israel. And who knows, maybe they would have left Israel and taught Torah everywhere. Rabbi Akiva was building an entire generation of Torah teachers through his own teachings himself. And everything was great. And suddenly, between this period we are in right now, between Pesach and Shavuot, that's Pesach, and as the Torah knows it, Atzeret, a disease, a plague, hit the world and hit these students living in Israel as well. And all 24,000 of them died from a disease that somehow, and this is an important fact, affected their throats. It was called askara, a certain choking disease that affected a lot of people and wiped out, in a short period of time, between Pesach and Shavuot, all of these individuals. Wow. Rabbi Akiva was decimated. Decades of hard work, building up the next Torah generation, was wiped out in a 33-day period. Terrible. This period, which is a happy period from Pesach to Shavuot, they were looking forward to receiving the Torah on Shavuot every single year anew. Terrible. Now, mourning started to hit the Jewish people. And there are customs for people, actually laws. We don't get married during this time. And we don't celebrate with live music during this time. Many people won't shave or cut their hair during this time. Signs of mourning ended up floating during this time. And that's how the Jewish people reacted to this. I mean, I just want to give you a modern day update so you can understand, or example, so you can understand. I want you to imagine Europe and many parts of the Middle East before the Second World War. We had yeshivot. We had Jewish schools of learning that were full of rabbis who were going to disseminate Torah throughout the entire Europe and maybe the entire world. Then came the Holocaust. And in a short period, how many yeshivot, how many of these righteous men, women, children, and their entire families and rabbis were all wiped out? It wasn't just them, of course. It was their descendants and all future potential students that would come out from them. And it took the Jewish people decades to rebuild, which thank God we have done, and create schools of learning that can carry on our Jewish traditions and learnings. That's what happened to Rabbi Akiva and his students. It didn't happen in 4 or 5 years. It happened in just over a month. This was devastating, and the entire Jewish world since that time has accepted, during this happy period, an element of mourning over this time. Let's go a little bit deeper. Please follow with me. Rabbi Akiva decided that he wanted, just like those survivors who came out of the Holocaust, said, we suffered greatly, but I want to rebuild. And Rabbi Akiva said, we are going to rebuild. But instead of 24,000 students, he decided to pick 5. 5 rabbis who he said are going to, we're not going for quantity, we're going for quality. And these 5 are going to become the future of the Jewish world. And really much of the Torah that we have today come from these 5 students that survived after Rabbi Akiva. He then turned around to these 5 students and he said, do me a favor. Don't you 5 be like the 24,000 who came before you. Please, do me a favor. Treat each other with great respect and honor. Because those 24,000 didn't, and that's why they died. Wow. Now that, my friends, is a big and powerful statement. Really? That's why? Rabbi Akiva somehow, he had the power to see the root cause for the demise of these 24,000 students that did not let them live in order to teach the next generation. And he said, you know what happened? A lot of what happened to them was caused by themselves. They weren't worthy of teaching Torah. Why? Because they were disrespectful towards each other. Now, let me be very clear, my friends. These were great, great individuals. these people were very, very learned in all areas of the Torah. They would not have been Rabbi Akiva's chosen students had they not been. And yet, Rabbi Akiva told us so clearly and warned these new 5 students that these 24,000, they were missing something very, very important. And he warned them. And he said, if you want to live and take on the responsibility that I'm going to give you, you're going to have to be nice to each other. Which means that these 24,000 students may have been very learned and kept all the mitzvot, kept Shabbat, Yom Kippur, and they may have known areas of the Torah that we are not even familiar with anymore. But they weren't nice, respectful towards each other. They didn't give kavod, zelazah, honor to each other. Boom, the whole thing's gone. And Rabbi Akiva, if you remember, as we mentioned just a few moments ago, was the one who turned around after hearing the words of Hillel. Because Hillel was the one who said, V'yahavta recha kamocha, and whatever you don't like, don't do to others. And Rabbi Akiva was like, that's the klal. That's the general principle. Shabbat's important, but that's not the general principle. There's many important laws in Judaism, but if you want to know the general principle that everything else rides on, it's loving other people like you love yourself. So Rabbi Akiva was being very, very consistent. And he was telling these 5 students and telling us as well that the problem was with these 24,000, they're messing up. They messed up royally. They may have been great Torah scholars, but they were missing out on one big klal sheba Torah, one big general principle of all Torah, as Hillel told the convert, V'yahavta l'recha kamocha. If you don't like it, don't do it to anybody else. That, my friends, is the secret. And so it's not a coincidence that this whole story of Rabbi Akiva and his 24,000 students occurred now, in between Pesach and Shavuot. Because remember, right now we're building ourselves from Pesach free people to Torah receivers. And that's a 49-day process. And there's one major area we need to work on at this time. You know, different times of the year and before different holidays, there's different things we can work on. We know between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, we work on self-improvement, and teshuvah, we do repentance. And we know that during Sukkot, we do emunah, we work on our faith and our happiness and our trust in God. So we know that different times of the year come with different forms of avodah, different forms of work that we need to put into ourselves. This period between Pesach and Shavuot is all about working on our ben adam lechaveiro, between how we treat other people. Because if you want to prepare yourselves to receive the Torah, as Hillel said to this convert, potential convert, you want to convert, that means you're going to go through your own personal Shavuot. That's great. Oh, that's amazing. But you really want that? You're going to have to work before anything else on how you treat your fellow man or woman or child or boss or employee or employer or whoever else, or that person in front of you in the supermarket or that person driving down the street. And this is a crucial area of Jewish life. So much so that without it, you've missed the entire point of being Jewish. And that's why there is a very strong custom among the Jewish world, which I'm involved in myself, of learning Pirkei Avot between Pesach and Shavuot. Pirkei Avot are chapters of Mishnah and Braita that we learn this time of year, which involve personal development and how we treat and how we act towards other people. That, my friends, is the secret of this time. The best way to prepare from Shavuot, Rabbi Akiva taught us, is self-improvement of working on our relationship with other people, our spouses, our children, our friends, our family. There's a lot of work to be done, and this is very, very difficult work. Extremely challenging. Remember, it's a klal gadol shebatorah. Every other mitzvah is hanging on to how we affect our relationships from this one idea, and this is the time to do it. And that's why these individuals, these great students, Rabbi Akiva, all died during this time. Because this is the time that they should have been aware. They needed to work on themselves in preparation for Shavuot, and they weren't doing it. They just couldn't handle it. Having said all that, on the 33rd day of the Omer, which this year, by the way, 2021, because this Thursday night and Friday day is Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is the 33rd day of the Omer. And the mourning process that we took on from the days of Rabbi Akiva disappear. They go away. They stop. Why? Because his students stopped dying on that day. Now, what it was about that particular day that they were able to stop this plague attacking so many people in the land of Israel, we don't know. And by the way, God willing, this Lag BaOmer will be an end to the plague we are all and have all been affected by this year. You should know that Lag BaOmer has the power to stop plagues. If you hadn't missed it, we've been suffering from a plague for a number of months, well over a year. So let's utilize this day of Lag BaOmer, Thursday night, Friday day, with prayers and contemplation and meditation and tzedakah in order to hopefully make a cessation to stop this plague that we've all been affected with as well. What was it about this day? Well, a number of things happened on it. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai died on this day and revealed a lot of Torah, mystical Torah. Actually, many people don't realize the man, right? The heavenly food that fed our ancestors in the desert for 40 years started to fall on Lag BaOmer. We left Egypt with 30 days supply of matzah. 3 days we had no bread or matzah. And then the 33rd day, after leaving Egypt, we started to receive the man from Shemayim, from heaven. So there's a certain, as we say in Hebrew, hashpa'ah, a certain power that is raining down to us on this time. Maybe that was part of it. I don't know. But this is the reality. This is the mitziot. What an amazing opportunity to stop plagues and challenges. And so simple. 33rd day of the Omer, Lag BaOmer, that's this Thursday night, Friday day. If we just work on our problems between each other, increase our avodah for that one day, it has tremendous powers that can bring great relief to ourselves, our people, and ultimately the entire world. And it all comes, says Rabbi Akiva, from one sentence: V'ahavta l'orecha kamocha. Love other people like you love yourself, says Rabbi Akiva. Ze klal gadol b'Torah. When you do that one thing, when you're careful to love other people like you love yourself, you know what you enjoy, do it for other people. You know you don't like people speaking lashon hara about you, don't speak it about them. You know you like when people do favors for you, or cheer you up with a smile, or cheer up with a good word, then you do it for other people as well. We're able to enact that. Blessings come into our lives, and the rest of the Torah will fall into place. And God willing, the hashpa'ah, the great power that can come to us, like the man that came from heaven to feed our ancestors for 40 years, parnasah, success in our lives, God willing, will come to us as well. That is the secret of Rabbi Akiva. That's the fatal mistake of his students. Great scholars, not being nice to each other. That's what led them all to die during this 33-day period. And that, my friends, is how we have to live our lives as well. And that's the secret of Rabbi Akiva and all future generations. God willing, we will all have an amazing, inspirational Lag BaOmer with success, health, and success financially, and with our children, God willing, and all the blessings that you want for yourselves should come true, God willing, this Lag BaOmer. Thank you very much. I'll see you all tomorrow at 12 o'clock. Have a great day. Okay?